Hello there, and welcome to Nothing Ventured, Nothing Gamed. I'm your Rules Arbiter Steve, and it has been a while since our last video. And since our last video, we have hit 1,000 subscribers, so thank you all at home for watching our videos and enjoying the content that we create. But now back to the video. And what are we talking about today? We are talking about the BARD. We're going to be going through all the classes that came out in the new Pathfinder Core rulebook. And then soon to be released the Pathfinder Core 2 that's going to release all the remaining classes that they're going to be coming out with this new remaster, revitalization, rework that Pathfinder is going through. So without any more further ado, let's get to the BARD. And what the hell the BARD is, why would you want to play one, what can they do, and just all of that jazz, because I don't know how to end an intro. Take that, internet. So since a lot of you at home, we started our channel making Pathfinder 2nd edition content, probably already know what a BARD is. And even if you're coming from 5th edition, not much about the idea of the BARD really changed from Pathfinder and D&D. But for some of you who have never heard of a BARD, or you're coming from a completely different system, or this is your first RPG ever, and you go, what the hell does a BARD can do? What is it? What is a BARD? We're going to give you a little bit of a crash course in the idea of what a BARD is. So if you're familiar with the BARD, you don't want to hear me rambling on about what the hell a BARD is, and you're like, I already know that crap. There's going to be timestamps below if I can figure out how to pull it off. Timestamps, you can skip ahead to the other sections where I talk about other stuff about the BARD. But for those of you who don't know, like I said, you might be coming from a different game system, or this is your first role-playing game ever in the creation of anything they've ever created ever. The BARD is I don't want to say it's a magical musician, because you don't have to be a musician to play a BARD, but they're iconically shown with a musical instrument of some sort, and they generally sing with their music. They kind of hone in the power of performance, and that's how they can basically call magic to them and use magic. But they aren't only about magic. They're kind of a mix of like a sorcerer and a bard and a rogue. It's kind of like the two mixed together in some ways. You can think of it that way, as like a gross oversimplification of what the BARD really is. So like I said, they do share some similarities with rogues, so they do get a little bit more skills than, say, your fighters or your druids or your clerics, some of the other classes that are in the Pathfinder Core rulebook. And since their bonus to their stats is charisma, they tend to do well in social encounters. Whether they're using their performance to weasel out their way of trouble, whether they're picking the deception or intimidate skills, or the diplomacy skills to smooth over interactions with other people to get them out of trouble, or more likely it's going to happen in your group, get them into trouble. But they also have, obviously, we talked about before, they cast spells. So unlike a rogue, where a rogue has to rely solely on their skills and their ability to play the game and their combat potential, the BARD has spells to fall back on. And that one of the key components of a BARD is their ability to cast compositions. Now, compositions, you're like, oh, well, I have to sing as a bard. You don't have to sing. It's really any performance thing you want. I mean, I've even seen people in role-playing games say, like, my character dances to inspire others. So it's really however you want to portray your bard and how they're using their performance to kind of bring their magic forth. Like I said, similar to rogues, since charisma is your main driving statistic for this class, a lot of things drive off charisma. You're going to have, and you do have quite a few skills, even if you don't have a good intelligence, you're going to have quite a few skills where you can really spread around your focus on your skills. So not only do you have to rely on your magic, you can also rely on your vast array of skills that some other classes may not have access to. Similar, like I said, a thing I mentioned before is like, you look at the fighter and how many skills they don't get, and then you notice that for the most part, fighters aren't really mainlining intelligence for the most part. they're not going to have too many skills to pick from. But you have a nice baseline amount of skills, and if you have a couple of points of intelligence, you can just get a, you know, pick up a few more, and you're not going to be as skilled as a rogue or someone who's really focusing on intelligence like a wizard, but you are going to have a nice breadth of skills to be able to basically do stuff in combat and do stuff out of combat. So one of the main, I would say, tricks that a bard has is their compositions. These are cantrips, that special cantrips that they can get. They get a few as they level, but they can also pick up a few more if they pick the right feats at higher levels. And what these are, they're cantrips, so they don't cost you focus points, and the compositions are a special type of focus spell. You're going to get cantrip focus spells, which don't cost focus points to use, and you're going to get actual focus spells, which do cost you points to use as you gain higher levels. A lot of these help not only yourself, but they help your fellow party members, or they hinder your enemies. And we're going to go over a few of the main ones that are in the core book as the kind of the main things that you may be doing in combat and the main things you might be doing out of combat, as well as all the other things that people normally do in combat, like attacking, casting spells, and all that stuff. But the bard can be seen as kind of like a jack of all trades, and they're really, if you turned it into like a video game mindset, they're a support class more than anything else. They have the capacity to cast some level of healing spells, because they do have the occult list, so they get things like soothe and other spells like that, but they also get probably one of the most important support spells for combat in the game, I would say the fact that you can keep casting it, it's a cantrip, so you can just keep firing it off. It gives the +1 to attack and damage, and +1 to saves versus fear effects. Any fear effect, you're going to get a +1 to your save, which most likely is going to be a will save. And you're going to realize that +1s in Pathfinder, if you have a bard in your party, you're going to realize really fast that +1s to attack really make a difference. A +2 is like enormous. So +1s really make the difference between hitting or missing, or hitting versus critically hitting. So you're going to realize how much damage potential that a bard has by helping all of their other party members do better. And then sometimes they can add to defenses, making their AC higher. They can add to their skills, making their skills a little higher. So they get quite a lot of variety of ways that they can support their party members throughout their levels and throughout their choices as they level up. So don't snuff up at the +1 to attack that doesn't get any better, and really doesn't get any better unless you take really specific feats. The +1 to attack and damage is huge, especially in the Pathfinder 2nd Edition system, where +1s matter way more than in some other systems. Obviously, if you look at the bard, one of their main features is not only their compositions, but their spellcasting in general. So you're going to get cantrips, which don't use any spell slots at all, and you can keep casting them throughout the adventuring day, and they never go away. And then that they also automatically heighten to your levels. So what is heightening? So as a first level character, you cast spells as a first level caster. When you start to leveling up and get more powerful, and you get more powerful as a bard, some of your spells are going to say heightened plus effect. So it's going to say as you get more powerful, some of these spells are going to enhance their effects. Detect Magic is we actually made a video about Detect Magic, but Detect Magic is a good one. So at a certain level, it gets a little bit more powerful, and at another level, it gets even more powerful. And then some things like Telekinetic Projectile is a pretty common one. Is that it's a combat spell, it does damage, it's basically throwing and magically picking up a rock and throwing it at somebody. As you get higher level, it does more damage. Those are what it means by when cantrips automatically heighten. You just look at the spell. Most spells have a heightened effect. Some of them don't, but they still treat as higher level spells, so it still matters at higher levels when people start to stop your magic. But that's a conversation for another day. The bards also get bards along with all other spellcasters. At least this is all other spellcasters that I've seen in Pathfinder 2nd Edition get what's called focus spells. You get a small pool of focus points, and anytime you try to cast a focus spell, you deduct one of these points and cast your focus spell. Focus spells, similar to cantrips, also don't use spell slots. They use these points instead, and they automatically heighten to half your level. So they get more powerful as you get more powerful. There's a way of refreshing your pool. Your pool refreshes at the beginning of the adventuring day, so after you take effectively a long rest or an 8-hour rest, all your focus points come back, as well as there are ways you can take activities throughout the day to get some of your points back. Focus spells really is one way that you can differentiate different spellcasters from each other, even if they're pulling from the same spell list. So you look at sorcerers, which can pull from the occult spell list, and you look at bards that must cast from the occult spell list. Even though they can both cast from the occult spell list, their focus spells can really drive the differences between the two classes. There are other differences too, but the focus spells is the bard focus spells are only for bards. No one else can get them. The sorcerer focus spells are only for sorcerers. No one else can get them. You can multi-class, but for the most part, they're relegated to the different classes. So use them wisely, but it is a renewable resource, so don't be ashamed, don't be concerned by using them. Let those focus spells fly. Now for a few changes that happened between the original 2nd edition and the new Core 2nd edition that came out, the Remaster as it was originally coined. That there have been some changes to some of these classes, and Bard was not immune to these changes, and I think all of the changes are for the better. Now, while there haven't been a lot of changes for the Bard, there's a few significant ones that I want to bring attention to. Now, I'm not going to mention every single change that happened from from 2nd edition, original, I'm going to call it original, to the Remaster or the Core version of 2nd edition, the, Core. But I am going to mention the big highlights. And one of the things is the original Bard from 2nd edition got proficiency in a certain kind of weapons. They got simple weapons, which most everyone gets. And they got a smattering of, there was a list of things you got that were effectively martial weapons. It's like you got simple weapons and then these small list of things. The list is irrelevant because if you're using the core rules, they changed that. So now you get all simple and all martial. Now that may sound like a small change given the fact that you're not a direct combat class. You're not one of these classes. I mean, you could go like charging into battle and fighting, but the fact that you cast spells, you have way more options than say the fighter or the barbarian, even the paladin or the champion has in fighting and combat. So it's not always the first option that you're going to have is to charge into combat. You may have ranged options. Like I said, this doesn't seem on the surface to be a big thing, but one of the things is at first level, bards pick a muse. It's kind of their direction or their path. What inspires them to be a bard? And how do they show that they're inspired to be a bard? And there's a lot of different choices. And one of these choices was the warrior muse. The idea that you're inspired by battle and the heroicness and the epicness of battle. And that gave you, in the original version, martial weapon proficiency. It gave you all the martial weapons. But now we get all the martial weapons. So they reworked all of the warrior muses, muse feats, because as you get higher level, there's some feats that require you to be part of one muse over another. And they reworked a lot of these feats because as the warrior muse, you got baseline what used to be coming with the warrior muse. So they reworked that muse, and they also reworked the maestro muse because the maestro kind of dabbled in the warrior muse a little bit in the original editions. You're like, oh wait a minute, why is that maestro when that sounds very much warrior-like? So if you're already familiar with the muse feats, you go, oh, I played Pathfinder before, and I played a bard before. You might want to take a look at some of the muse feats, especially the warrior muse and the maestro muse, and I think one or two of the other ones had changed too. So you might want to take a good look at them to see what changed and how you might be able to rework your bard if your group is deciding to switch over from the original 2nd edition to the new version of 2nd edition. So we're going to talk a little bit about the choices that a bard makes. And really, because if you look at something like the Barbarian, which hasn't technically come out for the core yet, that's going to be coming in the core 2 book. But if you look at some of the classes and they have to pick something at level 1. If you look at Wizard, they have to pick a College of Magic. I'm going to call it a college. You have to pick a College of Magic. Once you pick that, your choice is set, and you really can't dabble in other colleges. You can pick other spells, but you can really dabble in colleges. When you're playing a Cleric, you pick War Priest or Cloister. That's really it. And then you don't really get, you can take the other feats, but you really can't dabble in the other path. But if you take a look at Druid is allowed to dabble in the other paths that they have choices of. So you have your main path, and then you can go, okay, well, you take a special feat, and it lets you branch out into other paths. You get like a lesser benefit for picking those paths. That is very similar to how Bard works. Bard could do this in the old version. Bard can still do this in the new version. They have a special feat where they can dabble into a second or more muse. Every time they take this feat, they can dabble into an additional muse, qualifying them to take more feats. So if I want to take a warrior muse, and I'm not a warrior muse bard, I can't take those feats. But if I take this feat, so if say I'm a maestro bard, at first level I pick maestro. I'm like, yeah, I like maestro. I like the flavor it gives me. I like some of the feats that I'm going to get selection on later down the line. But man, that warrior muse feat's really cool. I can take this special feat, what I believe is called multi-faris. I'm going to butcher this name. It's going to really, I'm going to butcher it. I'm going to put it on the screen so you can see it. You can pronounce it better than I can. So it'll be here over my face. Fariosu? It's that word. That word. Steve can't pronounce words. Let's just understand this. It's a feat at, I believe, at 2nd level. And once you take it, you can pick another muse you have never picked before. And then you get a lesser benefit of that muse. You don't get all the benefits, you get a lesser benefit. It lists the benefits that you get. And that also qualifies you to take feats for that muse as well as the muse that you're already part of. So you're kind of like a part of both, or all of them if you take this multiple times. This really lends you to have a wide variety of build options for your bard. You can really focus in, like, you look at muse, like, man, I really like the polymath muse. And I really just enjoy it. It just sounds like what I want out of my bard. And you really look at the polymath feats and you say you like most or all of them. Look, I'm going to take most of the polymath feats. Okay. And the other choices, like, okay, I'm going to ignore all the ones from the other muses, and I'm just going to pick the ones that don't require me to be polymath, because I have the polymath feats and then all the other ones. But you can then pick Maestro and Warrior, which is a common, in the original 2nd edition, it was kind of a popular kind of benefit because some of the Maestro ones were kind of warrior-like, and the Warrior muse also gave you a couple of benefits to pick Maestro and Warrior. And then you could pick both sets of feats as you leveled higher and higher. So it really gives you an option to really get a sense. There's no direct path for Bard. You can pick one path and just go with it. You can pick a couple of paths, or you can pick 3. You can pick as many as you want. Maybe there's a feat at this level you really want. You only want 1 or 2 feats out of the Warrior muse. And so you pick this up, you become a Warrior, and maybe you're Maestro, or maybe you're the polymath, and you just want to pick up those 1 or 2 feats that really harken into how you want to play your bard. So going into the spellcasting, there's 2 different styles of spellcasting, and it depends on the class you pick what style that class uses. If you're looking at wizards and clerics and druids, they use the idea of they can technically know any spell that they're allowed to cast, but they have to set them ahead of time. So in the beginning of the adventuring day, they wake up and they eat their breakfast, then now I have to set my spells. What spells do I think I'm gonna need today? And you have to set up so having a head knowledge is way more beneficial to those classes, and having those one-off weird spells isn't as much of a detriment because you just don't slot them if you don't think you need them. with classes with a spell repertoire, the benefit is you can cast any spell that you know from any slot that is able to be cast from at any time. You don't have to memorize them ahead of time. You don't have to prepare or anything like that. But the drawback is twofold. One is you only know a small number of spells. You have a thing called a spell repertoire, and those are the spells you know. And you can't learn any spells beyond that, unless they're coming from other sources. But we're assuming that you're just a bard and you don't get any spells from your ancestry, but it's assuming that we're just talking about bard. You have a small list of spells, you know these spells, and that's it. Well, the wizard may know 20, 30, 40 more spells than you. The cleric has access to all of their spells. The same thing with the druid. They have access to all the spells that they're allowed to cast. So a first level bard has maybe only 2 or 3 spells that they can cast from that are not cantrips, but the cleric has their entire first level of spells that they can wade through and pick. But they have to prepare them ahead of time. The other drawback is when you learn a spell, unlike those prepared casters, the people who use spell repertoire, when you learn a spell and you add it to your repertoire, you add it at a specific level. And obviously you can't add a level that you can't cast spells of. So if you're first level, all your spells are treated as first level. And if you never retrain these spells to make them higher level or higher rank, they will always stay first level, which means they never gain the benefits of spell casting at higher levels. If you look at we're going to look over here at Magic Missile, where we used to be called Magic Missile, but is now called Force Barrage. It's effectively the same spell from original Pathfinder. It just renamed the word, but the spell actually functions identically. You get 1 missile per action. You can spend up to 3 actions in your turn, and you get 1d4 plus 1 damage force missile that flies out and hits a target. No attack roll needed. It automatically hits. As you gain more power and you cast at a higher level, every action you spend gives you more missiles, which you have to be casting at that higher level. So even if I put, as a bard, a first level force barrage into a 5th level spell slot, it's still going to generate 1 missile, 1 missile per action that does 1d4 plus 1 damage, because that's a first level spell and it doesn't gain benefits of the heightening effect. And bards and all spontaneous casters have a way around this. Once you're able to cast higher than first rank spells, which happens at 3rd level, you get your 2nd rank spell slots, you get a new ability called Signature Spell. And like I said, every single spontaneous or repertoire character that's cast using a spell repertoire gets this. As far as the game has been released so far, this could change in the future, and they have a weird class that doesn't get this. But for now, every single character that has spell repertoire gets Signature Spell. And what the hell is Signature Spell? Well, Signature Spell is at every rank, so at 1st rank, 2nd rank, 3rd rank, all the way up to 9, you can pick 1 spell. And that spell, you are so good at that spell does gain the heightened bonus if you put it in a higher spell slot that it qualifies for. So you do get 1 spell per rank as you are adventuring, and you can change these spells out. You can change your signature spell, you can change the spells in your spell repertoire. If you spend downtime retraining, you can change these up. There are feats you can get that give you more focus spells. So there are ways to expand your ability to cast spells and our ability to, like, okay, well, I learned that at low levels, but we really don't need this spell anymore. We can dump it out and trade it for a new one if you have enough gold and time for retraining. But sometimes having a wide variety of things you can do in and out of combat is very useful. And the Bard kind of does that as good compared to a lot of the other classes, if not better than some other classes. They even have a whole composition, a cantrip that lets them buff the skills of their other party members inside of combat and outside of combat. And there is an argument to be made that they're one of the best support classes in the game. The ability to grant +1 to attack and +1 to damage, as well as +1 to save versus skill versus fear effects to your party members in a pretty wide radius from you is probably one of the best buff spells in the game that costs you effectively almost 0 resources. It costs you actions. And the one thing that about the Bard is it's the juggling act of juggling your compositions, because your compositions only last 1 turn. So every turn you're having to constantly recast, or you're spending 1 or 2 actions re-upping your composition to continue exuding this benefit to your party members, whether that's +1 to their AC, whether that's +1 to attack and damage and save versus sphere, whether that's plus to their skills, or there's actually the Dirge of Doom, where it gives you, you effectively frighten your enemies and giving them minuses to a lot of their things. Effectively, minuses to all the things you're giving pluses to. With individual spells, you're giving minuses to them in one spell. Like I said, we talked about before that there's a variety of compositions that the bards eventually can get access to or choose through feats. There's the +1 to AC, there's plus the skill checks, there's a possibility even being able to mix. If you take the right feat, there's a possibility of mixing. So normally you can only have 1 composition up at a time. And once you cast a second one, the first one goes away. But the bards, based on the certain feat selections, you'll eventually be able to mix 2 compositions together and gain the benefits of both of them. And I will say, the number of times that I've missed an attack that a +1 would have helped and then made me hit, or the times that I would have critically hit, or another party member would have critically hit if only they were 1 more, is not to be ignored. It is more significant. It doesn't feel significant. It's only a +1. And in a lot of video games and a lot of games, like, I got +1s all the time. The +1s in this game for Pathfinder, the math is really tight. The +1s matter. And especially if you do have characters in your group that do a lot of like multi-weapon fighting. If you have a monk, or if you have like maybe a 2-weapon fighting ranger, or even a fighter that's using 2 weapons, getting that +1 to damage on every attack is pretty big. You know, that damage can also add up pretty quick. Sometimes that's, you know, if you have, let's say, a 2-weapon fighting fighter. Let's say if you have a 2-weapon fighting fighter and a ranger that's shooting an enormous amount of arrows every turn, or even a monk that's like using flurry blows and just going crazy at every turn. Every time they hit, they're doing 1 more damage with every single hit. That's 4, 5, 6, 7 damage a turn that you're swinging by like saying, hit better, guys. And then you just sit in the back, just shooting spells or doing other things, or intimidating people, or using deception and feinting and doing all that other stuff that potentially helps your party members, flanking with them, as well as giving them all damage. So it is nothing to kind of to turn your nose up at. When you're playing a bard, because I'm not doing anything. You're doing a lot by not actually doing that much, because you're letting your party do more. And then coupled with the flexibility of spell repertoire that we just talked about, being able to cast what you need when you need it, you're never going to be without an option. Now, spell casting has a little bit of a caveat of most spells take 2 actions, and then your 3rd action is to probably either cast or sustain your composition spell. You do run out of actions pretty quick, because most spellcasters do. And we talked a little bit about skills, the fact that they get a little bit more skills than your average character. But because they do get more skills than people like the druid, the cleric, and the fighter, obviously classes from this book, the witch and the wizard, although they don't get too many base skills, the fact that the intelligence is their main stat, they're going to get skills in that way. So they're kind of about equal to the bard when it comes to that. And obviously, since they're pumping intelligence, they're going to get more skills later on. But you don't have to invest in intelligence to get a lot of skills as a bard. You just kind of have this unerring knowledge. Your travels have taken you either through your travels, or you're just your crave of knowledge and knowing weird things and hearing the town talk about something. You just kind of know a little bit about everything. you kind of ride the line a little bit with having a few skills that you almost need if you want to play a certain type of bard. You know, if I want to play the sneaky, almost roguish type bard, well, I'm going to need, you know, stealth, and I might want to take thievery, and I'm going to want to take acrobatics, that when I do get into trouble, I need to get out of trouble. But even then, you're still going to have one or two skills, plus you're going to get skills from your background, that you're going to give it a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to your skill selections. Even though you may have an idea of your bard having these skills to accomplish the idea you have in your head, you're still going to have at least one or two skills, or maybe even more, that you can go, I just want to take lore cooking for some reason. I want to have my bard has been out in the wilderness and, you know, collecting stories as they go, and I've had to cook for myself over, you know, the eons and my characters have been around. You pick up lore cooking, or you pick up specific knowledge about some subject, or maybe you pick up some more generic skills like medicine or nature. So you can take something that's a little bit off the beaten path when it comes to skills, or you can work with your party and say, hey, what are we missing? And I might be able to take a couple of those skills to help shore up any of the weaknesses or missing components that we might want to have. If you have a bard in your game, or you yourself play a bard in your game, and you really like the idea of like the new bard and the new rules that came out in the new player core book, sign up in the comments down below. Or if you really hate the new changes, sign up in the comments below. If you like this video, give us a big old thumbs up. And also, if you like if you want to see more of us, there's a big old red subscribe button down below, and you can hit that so you can see us when we come up with new videos. We're going to be coming up with more videos with more classes from this book as we get to them. But until then, may your die rolls be crits, and may you always roll max damage. See you later. Hold on, I need 16 years of alcohol in me. Ron Swanson was right. Lagavulin is the way to go.